Lift up your heart and praise. Lift up your hands and praise. Lift up your voice and praise.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. We're so glad that you're joining us today, and we're glad to be able to be here together today. Amen. The name of the message today is called, Let Me Ask You This About These Four Things. Now, I want to share with you today about an opportunity I once had where I got contacted by this gentleman through Eliah's homepage about our congregation, and he's a Christian that has a street ministry in Dalton. Yahweh may be calling him out. We had a very nice conversation, which included what's happened to the truth over all the years, and you know what has happened to the Torah. And the next evening, I got this letter, and it had this as part of it. It said, "Question: Concerning keeping the law by believers, could you explain Acts chapter 15, please?" And I wrote him back, and I said, "Well, I'll be glad to." And so today I wanted to share some of that with you, because this concerns a proof text, a famous one-liner, if you will, which frequently comes up in opposition to the Torah. And I don't believe he's using it that way. But it is something that needs to be addressed. And if you have ever spent much time in the church, you have likely heard this. All right. Well, so what's the rub? And what's he talking about? Well, let's turn and take a look. Turn with me to Acts chapter 15. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Acts chapter 15 and verse 1. And it says, "And certain men came down from Yehuda and were teaching the brothers," that would be Judah, "unless you are circumcised according to the practice of Moshe, you are unable to be saved." So when Shaul, that would be Paul, and Barnabas, had no small dissension and dispute with them, they arranged for Shaul and Barnabas and certain others of them to go to Jerusalem to the emissaries and elders about this question. So, being sent on their way by the assembly, they passed through Phoenicia and Shomeron, relating the conversion of the Gentiles. And they were causing great joy to all the brothers. And having arrived in Jerusalem, they were received by the assembly and the emissaries and the elders, and they reported all that Elohim had done with them. And some of the believers who belonged to the sect of the Pharisees rose up, saying, "It is necessary to circumcise them and to command them to keep the Torah of Moshe." And the emissaries and the elders came together to look into this matter, and when there had been much dispute, Kepha, that would be Peter, rose up and said to them, "Men, brothers, you know that a good while ago Elohim chose among us that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the good news and believe. And Elohim, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the set-apart spirit, as also to us, and made no distinction between us and them, cleansing their hearts by belief. Now then, why do you try Elohim by putting a yoke on the neck of the taught ones, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But through the favor of the Master Yeshua Messiah, we trust to be saved in the same way as they." And all the crowd was silent and were listening to Barnabas and Shaul, declaring how many miracles and wonders Elohim did among the Gentiles through them. And after they were silent, Jacob answered, saying, "Men, brothers, listen to me. Shimon has declared how Elohim first visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And the words of the prophets agree with this, as it has been written. After this I shall return and rebuild the booth of David, which has fallen down, and I shall rebuild its ruins, and I shall set it up, so that the remnant of mankind shall seek Yahweh, even all the Gentiles on whom my name has been called, says Yahweh, who is doing all this, who has made this known from of old. Therefore I judge that we should not trouble those from among the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim, but that we write to them to abstain from the defilements of idols, and from whoring, and from what is strangled, and from blood. For from ancient generations Moshe has in every city those proclaiming him, being read in the congregation every Sabbath. Then it seemed good to the emissaries and elders, with all the assembly, to send chosen men from among them to Antioch with Shaul and Barnabas, Yehuda being called Barsabba, and Silla, leading men among the brothers, having written by their hand this: the emissaries and the elders and the brothers, to the brothers who are of the Gentiles in Antioch and Syria and Kilkia, greetings. Since we have heard that some who went out from us have troubled you with words unsettling your lives, to whom we have no command, it seemed good to us, having become of one mind, to send chosen men to you with our beloved Barnabas and Shaul, men who have given up their lives for the name of our Master Yeshua Messiah. We have therefore sent Yehuda and Silla, who are also confirming this by word of mouth. For it seemed good to the set-apart Spirit and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessities, that you abstain from what is offered to idols, and blood, and what is strangled, and whoring. If you keep yourself from these, you shall do well. Be strong. They, therefore, being sent off, went to Antioch, and having gathered the crowd together, they delivered the letter. So there is the troubling thing. Those who oppose the Torah claim that because of what we just read, that the everlasting covenant of circumcision is not necessary for Gentiles. Did you get what I just said? The everlasting covenant of circumcision is not necessary for Gentiles. And that there are only 4 things that Gentiles have to do in order to be saved. And that is what our friend's question is about. Right? So I explained to him that I was not going to go into all the New Testament passages that speak to the permanency and the continuance of the Torah, but that I wanted to address a very important one, and I'll bet you can guess what it is. Let's all turn to Matthew chapter 5. And if you'll remember last week when I was talking about minoring in the majors, I also talked about the Great Commission and about how the Great Commission was to go to all the nations, teaching them everything that Yeshua had taught his taught ones, right? Okay, so that would include what we're about to read here. Matthew 5, and we're going to start reading in verse 17. Do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. For truly, I say to you, till the heaven and the earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the reign of the heavens, but whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the reign of the heavens. Now, note that he did not say, till I be crucified, till I be resurrected, till I ascend to the right hand of my Father, etc. He said, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. Now, I believe that we can read about this event that he's referring to here in Revelation 21, so let's take a look at that. Revelation 21. We're going to be on page 1209 in the 98 ISR. Revelation 21 and verse 1. And I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, for the former heaven and the former earth had passed away. That sounds very similar to Matthew 5:18, right? Okay. And the sea is no more. And I, Yochanan, that would be John, saw the set-apart city, renewed Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the heavens saying, See, the booth of Elohim is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them, and be their Elohim. And Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for the former matters have passed away. And he who is sitting on the throne said, See, I make all matters new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and trustworthy. And he said to me, It is done. Does that sound similar to Matthew 5:18? All right, it is done. I am the Aleph and the Tau, the beginning and the end. To the one who thirsts I shall give of the fountain of the water of life without payment. So, Yahshua Messiah testifies to the permanency of even the smallest part of the Torah. All right? I heard a preacher one time say, Paul did not come to straighten Yahshua out. Right? And I've always liked that because that's exactly what they do with Paul in the church. But note what Yahshua says after he says, till heaven and earth one jot, till the heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. He says, verse 19, Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the reign of the heavens, but whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the reign of the heavens. Right? This is very important when evaluating not only what he intended, but what his disciples would have taught as well. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
You see, according to the witness in the testimony of Yahshua Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim, I'll just throw that in there for good measure. If Paul, Peter, James, John, or anyone else for that matter, had broken and taught to break even the least of the commands, he would not be anything but called least in the kingdom of heaven, according to Yahshua. All right? Circumcision is not a jot or a tittle. It's a chunk. Okay? All right? So what's up with Acts 15? Our understanding is that there was a sect of the Pharisees that was known as the circumcision. And these guys would compel new converts to be circumcised. Now, even Yahweh, though he did eventually give the covenant of circumcision to Abraham, he did not put circumcision on him from the start, but later. Okay? These guys, however, were compelling new converts to take the sign of the everlasting covenant before they ever even had a basic understanding of what belief in the way meant. All right? The disagreement discussed in chapter 15 was between Paul and Barnabas and these Jews. All right? So let's look at Acts 15 again and keep your finger in it because we're going to wind up coming back to it because that's sort of what this teaching's about. Acts 15, we're going to start reading in verse 5. Acts 15, verse 5. Everybody there? And what's that next word? Some. Okay. And some of the, what's that next word? Believers who belonged to the sect of the Pharisees rose up, saying, It is necessary to circumcise them and to command them to keep the Torah of Moshe. Have you noticed that before, that there were Pharisees who were believers in Yahshua? Interesting. See, some people have not seen that before. All right. And these guys said, it is necessary to circumcise them and to command them to keep the Torah of Moshe. Now, note what follows. The apostles never say that the new converts do not ever have to be circumcised or that they do not have to keep the Torah. Let's look at what they did say. Okay? Verse 6. And the emissaries and the elders came together to look into this matter. And when there had been much dispute, Kepha, Peter, rose up and said to them, Men, brothers, you know that a good while ago Elohim chose among us that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the good news and believe. And Elohim, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the set-apart spirit as also to us, and made no distinction between us and them, cleansing their hearts by belief. Now, I would interject that though receiving the set-apart spirit is a tov thing indeed, and that it's not given to those who are in rebellion against Yahweh, but it does not mean that the person who received it is saved and suddenly no longer has to walk in the ways of Yahweh. Okay? David understood that Yahweh gives it and that he can take it away. All right? Keep your finger in Acts, but turn to Psalm 51. Psalm 51, we're going to be on page 673. Psalm 51. We're going to start reading in verse 10. Psalm 51, verse 10, and it says, Create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your set-apart spirit from me. Well, why would he say something like that if once you got it, you got it? Okay? So moving right along, Acts 15, verse 8. And Elohim, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the set-apart spirit, as also to us, and made no distinction between us and them, cleansing their hearts by belief. Now then, why do you try Elohim by putting a yoke on the neck of the taught ones, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But through the favor of the Master YHWH Messiah, we trust to be saved in the same way as they. And then all the crowd was silent and were listening to Barnabas and Shaul, declaring how many miracles and wonders Elohim had done among the Gentiles through them. And I remind you, Shaul is Paul, if you're reading in a different version. And after they were silent, Yaakov, that would be James, answered, saying, Men, brothers, listen to me. Shimon, or Simon, has declared how Elohim first visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And the words of the prophets agree with this, as it has been written, After this I shall return and rebuild the booth of David, which is fallen down, and I shall rebuild its ruins, and I shall set it up, so that the remnant of mankind shall seek Yahweh, even all the Gentiles on whom my name has been called, says Yahweh, who is doing this, who has made this known from old. Therefore I judge that we should not trouble those from the Gentiles who are, what's that next word? Turning to Elohim. But that we write to them to abstain from the defilements of idols, and from whoring, and what is strangled, and from blood. For from ancient generations Moshe has in every city those proclaiming him, being read in the congregation every Sabbath. All right, now an important thing to notice here is it says Gentiles who are turning to Elohim. Okay? One has to presume they were turning from what? Paganism. Okay? From paganism. But these are the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim, on which James says we should not trouble other than to abstain from the defilements of idols, and from whoring, and what is strangled, and from blood. Now note that James did not include, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet your neighbor's stuff, call on the name of Yahweh, don't profane the name of Yahweh, honor your father or your mother, you do not bear false witness against your neighbor. He did not say love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And he did not even say you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Though YHWH said those were the two great commands in the Torah. Okay? Even that all the Torah and the prophets hang on those two. He didn't even mention those. He said abstain from the defilement of idols, and from whoring, and from what is strangled in blood. Yet, we would all agree that Yahweh requires these things in order to enter into everlasting life that I just mentioned. Okay, keep your finger here, Matthew 19. Matthew 19. We're going to start reading in verse 16, so we'll be on page 939. Matthew 19, 16. And see, one came and said to him, Good teacher, what good shall I do to have everlasting life? Okay, so what's he wanting to know? How to get everlasting life. Right, that was easy, wasn't it? Okay. And he said to him, verse 17, Why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. But if you wish to enter into life, abstain from what is offered to idols, and blood, and what is strangled, and whoring. If you keep yourself from these, you shall do well. Is that what yours says? Yours doesn't say that. Does yours, Cece? No? Let me look at it again. Oh no, it says, but if you wish to enter into life, guard the commands. And he said to him, which? And YHWH said, you shall not murder. That's not one of the four. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. Well, that one's not one of the four. You shall not bear false witness. That's not one of the four. Respect your father and your mother. That's not one of the four. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's not one of the four. The young man said to him, all these I have watched over from my youth. What do I still lack? And YHWH said to him, if you wish to be perfect, go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. All right? Now, look over here real quickly. Revelation 22. Don't lose your spot in Acts. Revelation 22. We're going to read in verse 12, starting in 12. And we're going to be on page 1210. It says, and see, I am coming speedily, and my reward is with me to give to each according to his work. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those doing his commands, so that the authority shall be theirs under the tree of life, and to enter through the gates into the city. But outside are the dogs and those who enchant with drugs. Well, that isn't one of the four. And those who whore. And the murderers. Well, that's not one of the four. And the idolaters. That one is. And all who love and do falsehood. Neither is that one of the four things required of the Gentiles turning to Elohim. All right. Yet, it clearly shows that those who have the authority to the tree of life will be the commandment keepers, and those outside are not commandment keepers. Okay? So what's up with the four things? Acts 15, verse 19. Note what James says after giving them these four things. Did y'all not keep your finger there? Acts, too many fingers. Acts 15, verse 19. And we're going to be on page 1068. Not enough fingers. Therefore, verse 19, I judge that we should not trouble those from among the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim, but that we write to them to abstain from the defilements of idols, and from whoring, and what is strangled, and from blood. Now look at verse 21. For from ancient generations Moshe has in what? Every city those proclaiming him, being read in the congregation. When? Every Sabbath. So if these guys actually had the authority to say to the Gentiles they didn't need to concern themselves with the Torah, why would he make this statement? For from ancient generations Moshe has in every city those proclaiming him, being read in the congregation every Sabbath. The answer is because keeping the Torah is required. See, you don't have to turn here. It's just one verse. 1 John 3:4. In the KJV it says, whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. All right. The ISR puts it this way. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. Okay? But remember that Yahshua did not come teaching a new religion, but rather the proper understanding and observance of Moshe, or the Torah. And that these gentlemen had been taught by Yahshua himself. Amen? All right? And remembering that all of them viewed life from a Hebraic frame of mind, what's going on here? Our belief is that they were only trying to get the Gentiles who were turning to Elohim to put distance between themselves and the defilements of pagan worship, and to get cleaned up or undefiled, if you will, from other abominations enough so as to be able to go into the synagogue on the Sabbath without making the other worshipers unclean. Ding, ding, ding. All right. Yet, they could hear the Torah or Moshe read there every Sabbath in order to fully turn to Elohim. All right. Rather than put burdens on these Gentiles that were not ready to, that the Gentiles were not ready to bear, the apostles only required the Gentiles who were turning to Elohim to be cleaned up enough to go into the synagogue on the Sabbath, and then allow the Spirit to work on the individual. All right? Did you know that Noah was not a Hebrew? Much less an Israelite. A gasp goes across the room. As a matter of fact, it was from Noah that all the Gentiles came. Right? And so too, it is from Noah that Yisrael came. Right? Do you remember that Yahweh was grieved that He had made man because man's heart was continually on wickedness, which means they were not turning to Elohim, but turning away from Him, and that He destroyed everyone except Noah and his family. Right? See, the Scripture tells us that Noah was a righteous man who indeed turned to Elohim. It says he walked with Elohim. Right? After telling Noah to get out of the ark, do you know what the first command Yahweh spoke to Noah and his family was when Yahweh blessed them and made a covenant with mankind? Keep your finger in Acts. Turn to Genesis chapter 9. Bereshit chapter 9. This should only take one finger. We're going to start reading verse 1. We're going to be on page 65. Genesis 9, Bereshit 9, verse 1. And Elohim blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, bear fruit and increase and fill the earth, and the fear of you and the dread of you is on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the heavens, and all that creeps on the ground, and on all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they have been given. Every moving creature that lives is food for you. I have given you all, as I gave the green plants. But do not eat flesh with its life, its blood. Evidently, he just destroyed a bunch of blood eaters. That's not far-fetched. All right? But only your blood for your lives I require. From the hand of every beast I require it, and from the hand of man, from the hand of every man's brother I require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood is shed, for in the image of Elohim has he made man. As for you, bear fruit and increase, bring forth teemingly in the earth and increase in it. And Elohim spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, and I establish my covenant with you, with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the birds of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. And I shall establish my covenant with you, and never again is all flesh cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again is there flood to destroy the earth. So those who turn to Elohim have been commanded not to eat blood from the day they were rescued from the flood and entered back into dry land. Okay? That's not a New Testament idea. Nope. That's from Genesis 9. That's the first command of the first covenant with mankind after the annihilation of the former mankind. That might be important. All right? The second command is don't spill another man's blood or your blood will be required. But the first was you do not eat blood. All right? Now, there's no indication, it doesn't say that Noah was circumcised. But Noah didn't eat Passover either, as far as we know. All right? But Noah lived before Yahweh made the covenant with Abraham. All right? The same covenant that was required of Israel and the same covenant that YHWH entered into. And a circumcision is required for one to be circumcised in order to partake of the Passover. But this is not something that one should be compelled to do by another before the guy has a good understanding of what all this means. This seemed good to everyone concerned, and after that, they sent Paul and Barnabas off on a mission to the assemblies in Antioch and Syria and Cilicia. But the apostles never meant to convey that the Gentiles who were turning to Elohim could continue in all sorts of egregious transgressions just so long as they kept these four things. There's only one Torah. All right? There is one for the Israelite, and there's not one for the Israelite and another one for the ones being grafted in. All right? Don't lose your spot. You might just stick something there, you know. All right, just one verse here, and one verse here, and one somewhere else. Numbers 15. We're going to read verse 16. Numbers 15 and verse 16, and it says, "One Torah and one right ruling is for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you." That would kind of probably be people that were turning to Elohim, amen, if they're going to be part of. All right. But one more. Galatians chapter 3. Galatians chapter 3, one verse. Going to be on page 1129, verse 28. Paul writes, "There is not Yehudite," that would be a Jew, "there is not Yehudite nor Greek, there is not slave nor free, there is not male and female, for you are all one in Messiah Yahshua." Okay? So, we're going to be back in Acts here. So Paul goes off on his mission, which is detailed in chapters 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And in chapter 18, 21, and 19, 21, Paul says that he wants to go to Jerusalem for the feast. We learn in chapter 20, verse 16, that the feast was Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks, or as many call it, Pentecost. All right? So we see Paul continuing in his devotion to the Torah to observe these appointed times of Yahweh. But note what happens when he gets back to Jerusalem and gets together with the exact same fellows who said, "Therefore I judge that we should not trouble those from among the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim, but we write for them to abstain from the defilements of idols and from whoring and from what is strangled and from blood." Acts 21. I'm going to start reading in verse 15. Page 1076. "And after those days, having made ready, he went up to Jerusalem, and also some of the taught ones from Caesarea went with him, and brought with them one Manasseh of Cyprus, an early taught one, with whom we were to lodge. And when we had arrived in Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly, and on the following day Shaul went in with us to Yaakov. James, and all the elders came. Now, remember, James is the one who came up with the requirements of the 4 things for the Gentiles who were turning to Elohim. Right? Verse 19. And having greeted them, he was relating one by one what Elohim had done among the Gentiles through his service. And when he heard it, they praised the master, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands of Yehudim there are who have believed, and all are ardent for the Torah. And they have been informed about you that you teach all the Yehudim who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moshe, saying not to circumcise the children, nor to walk according to the practices." See, Paul was misunderstood even in his own day. Okay? All right, verse 22. What then is it? They shall certainly hear that you have come, so do this, that we say to you, we being those taught ones in Jerusalem, we have 4 men who have taken a vow. All right. Take them and be cleansed with them and pay their expenses so that they shave their heads. This was a Nazirite vow. Numbers chapter 6. And all shall know that what they have been informed about you is not so, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the Torah. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, or in other words, are turning to Elohim, we have written and decided that they should keep themselves from what is offered to idols and blood and what is strangled and whoring. Because why? As we read in chapter 15, Moses is read in the synagogue in every city every Sabbath. Verse 26. Then Shaul took men on the next day, and having been cleansed with them, went into the set-apart place to announce the completion of the days of separation until the offering should be presented for each one of them. All right? Now, look at Numbers chapter 6, just briefly here. All right, Numbers chapter 6, and we see in verse 13 on page 145, and this is the Torah of the Nazirite, number 6:13. When the days of separation are completed, he is brought to the door of the tent of meeting, and he shall bring his offering to Yahweh, 1 male lamb, a year old, a perfect one, and a burnt offering, and 1 ewe lamb, a year old, a perfect one, as a sin offering, and 1 ram, a perfect one, as a peace offering, and a basket of unleavened bread, cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, and unleavened thin cakes anointed with oil, and their grain offering with their drink offerings. So there was a slaughtering that was involved in this. 3 actually, I think. All right. Okay. Now this is the same Paul who wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. There's just 2 verses here. I'll read them to you. 2 Corinthians 11, 24 and 25. This is the same Paul that wrote, 5 times I received from the Yehudim 40 stripes less 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have been in the deep. Paul did not mind standing up against things that he thought were wrong. He did not mind preaching Yeshua. All right? He even says that he opposed Peter to his face. All right? In Galatians 2:11 it says, and when Kepha had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face because he was at fault. Paul was not a pushover. No. All right? But what does he do when James and all the elders give him an opportunity to establish his position concerning the Torah? He goes to the tabernacle with these guys and makes an offering which included a slaughtering in order to prove that he was not teaching against Moshe or circumcision. All right? Paul had this peculiar and somewhat circular manner of speaking and writing. And this is probably what got him into trouble in the first place. You see, Paul did write in 1 Corinthians 7:19, the circumcision is not, and the uncircumcision is not. But guarding the commands of Elohim does matter. Okay, now, how does one say in the same breath, the circumcision is not, and the uncircumcision is not, but guarding the commands of Elohim does matter, especially since the command says, Leviticus 12, 1 through 3 says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, When a woman has conceived and has given birth to a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her monthly separation she is unclean. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin is circumcised." So that kind of sounds contradictory, doesn't it? The circumcision is not, and the uncircumcision is not, but the guarding of the commands of Elohim does matter. What Paul's driving at is not that one does not have to be circumcised. He's saying that our circumcision by itself is worthless. One has to keep the commands for the circumcision to take you very far with Elohim. All right? You see, in Romans 2:25, Paul also wrote, "For circumcision indeed profits if you practice the Torah. But if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision." That's what he's talking about. But see the way that he says it. That's why Paul went straight away to the temple with these fellows who had taken a vow to prove to them that he did not teach against the circumcision or the Torah. I once knew this fellow who said because he was a Gentile, the only requirements placed on him were the 4 things mentioned in Acts 15. I even pressed him one day and he said that he could commit murder. He said he could bear false witness. He said he could dishonor his father and his mother, etc. And it would not be held against him. Because all he had to do was those 4 things. Now, he went to a Pentecostal church. He talked in tongues, etc. And I think he has done himself a disservice. Especially when we consider what kind of statement this philosophy makes to Yahweh. All right? Yahweh always told Israel that there was one Torah for them and for the stranger. He also told them to take care of the stranger. All right? He does not expect those who are being grafted in to have a different Torah now. Okay? Paul never thought that either. Otherwise, what we're going to read next, these following verses, would have likely had a little disclaimer attached. Galatians chapter 5. We're going to start reading in verse 19, which is going to put us on page 1131. Galatians 5, verse 19. "And the works of the flesh are well known, which are these: adultery, whoring." All right, that's one of the 4. "Uncleanliness, indecency, idolatry." That's one of the 4. "Drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousies, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murders, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I forewarn you, even as I also said before, that those who practice such as these shall not inherit the reign of the Elohim." Except for the Gentiles, they can do most of these things and still enter the reign of Elohim, because all they have to do is abstain from the defilements of idols and from whoring and from blood and what's strangled. Right? See, I remind you that this is the same Paul who wrote this also just 2 chapters before. Galatians 3, flip back 1 page, in verse 28. "There is not Yehudite nor Greek, there is not slave nor free, there is not male nor female, for all are one in Messiah Yahshua." Do we really think that the same Paul who just got through saying that there was no difference because all are one in Messiah would turn around and identify rules that were applied to one but not the other? It's not likely. Amen? It's not likely. Now, Now, check this out. One verse, Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20. One verse, page 745, verse 10. Differing weights and differing measures, both of them are an abomination to Yahweh. Okay? Now look at this. I'll just read this one to you. Revelation 14:12. Here is the endurance of the set-apart ones. Here are those guarding the commands of Elohim and the belief of Yahshua Messiah. By the way, there's one thing that seems to be missing from this list of things that are required by Gentiles. Well, let me ask this. Do we really think that Yahweh, who abominates differing weights and different measures, would use different weights and measures on one group of folks versus another group of folks just because this group came from this line of Noah's family? Okay. I don't think so. All right. Now, there's one more thing that seems to be missing from the list of things required by Gentiles who are turning to Elohim. You see, it does not say that they have to believe in Yahshua Messiah either. Let that sink in just a second. It does not say that they have to believe in Yahshua Messiah either. I'm sure that they didn't mean to imply that Gentiles could deny Yahshua, you know? Neither did they mean to imply that Gentiles should, not grow in their understanding of keeping the Torah either. I mean, so I'm going to read it one more time. Acts 15. I'm going to start reading in verse 19, page 1068. Acts 15, verse 19. Therefore I judge that we should not trouble those from among the Gentiles who are turning to Elohim, but that we write to them to abstain from the defilements of idols, and from whoring, and from what is strangled, and from blood. For from ancient generations Moshe has in every city those proclaiming him, being read in the congregation every Sabbath. And that's what I've got to say when you ask about these four things. Yavarkeka Yahweh Ba'ishmareka Ya'er Yahweh Panavaleka Bikuneka Yasa Yahweh Panavaleka Biasim Laka Shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you his complete contentment.